Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I'm all sorts of excited for today's guest as well as today's topic because this is something that no matter what industry you're in, no matter what product or service type you sell, this is going to really give us insights into how to build better and more social proof so people actually see how amazing we are because that's part of our job as entrepreneurs. Let me tell you about today's guest that's going to shed so many of these insights for us. His name is Ted Goldwyn. Ted is the principal owner of Ted Goldwyn Communications, which is a marketing, communications, and research firm based in Western New York that develops long-form B2B content for major firms in the financial services industry. Now, here's one part that I'm so excited to hear about. Ted is also the founder of Success Story Studio, a boutique marketing agency with a mission to provide compelling, well-written, turnkey, short-form client success stories for small to mid-sized businesses and professional services firms. Previously, Ted spent 2 decades in financial services, which is obviously why he knows that industry so intimately and deeply, serving in executive roles at Corning Credit Union and the Bank of New York. Ted holds a bachelor's in applied economics and management from Cornell University as a fellow econ major. That speaks so much to my passions. And he also has an MBA in finance and international business from NYU's Stern School of Business. So he's really well accomplished from an academic perspective. He loves writing, which is something that is so near and dear to my heart. And I think all of that is going to give him a really interesting perspective to share with us today. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Ted Goldwyn. All right, Ted, I'm so excited that you're here with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. Glad to be here.
Heck yeah. So I tooted your horn just a little bit in your intro, but first things first, take us beyond the bio. How did you fall into it? Sounds like a linear path, but I know it's not always a linear path. Walk us through your journey to this point.
Yeah, well, Brian, it definitely was not a linear path. As you mentioned, I did spend close to 2 decades in financial services and banking, 10 years with a bank in the New York City area. I was involved in retail branch banking as well as product management on the small business services side. And then I moved on to a large size credit union up here in Western New York State to help them start up their commercial lending and small business products and services program that they had here. And then from there, so I spent 8 or 9 years at the credit union. And after that length of time, kind of in the corporate world, I decided to pursue my long-term dream of small business ownership and entrepreneurship, and really pursue my passions for writing, marketing, and helping small businesses. So back in 2014, a little over 9 years ago, I decided to put out my own shingle as a freelance content writer. Focusing on the financial services industry in particular. So the clients that I serve in that business, which is Ted Goldwyn Communications, are primarily mid to large size companies in the financial sector that provide high value products and services to banks and credit unions and other firms in the financial industry. I focus on long form content like white papers, case studies, ebooks, blogging, web content, you name it. Very research intensive, thought leadership type content. And then more recently, about a year and a half ago, I really saw a gap in the marketplace. Leverage from my experience, I write a lot of case studies for some of these larger firms. It's a very popular form of content, case studies or success stories, but I haven't seen a lot of smaller firms, smaller businesses, professional services firms like accountants, financial advisors and planners, attorneys using that type of asset as a way to generate and leverage social proof to grow their business. So I launched Success Story Studio, which, as you mentioned, is a boutique case study marketing firm really focused on smaller firms, professional services firms, to really help them leverage the power of their own best clients to generate and attract new business.
Yeah, Ted, I love that overview so much that I want to dive into. And for sure, we're going to talk about social proof and finding those client success stories and how we can actually use them in our marketing. But I think the elephant in the room in most marketing conversations is always, it's a big phrase. We've all heard it. Content is king. You and I are for sure biased in this. We both love writing. We are both content creators. And so a lot of people are probably thinking, well, I've heard this marketing cliche a million times, but how does it actually apply to my business? And Ted, I'm going to put you on the spot here because you're not only creating content, you're doing it in an industry that may not have the sexiest content of all time, the financial services industry. But talk to us about the role and the importance of content, especially we're not talking, 10-second vertical style TikTok videos. We're talking about this long form content that can actually lead to business. Talk to us about why it's so important.
Well, first off, Brian, I respectfully beg to disagree with you in terms of the sexiness of content within financial services. There's actually so many exciting things going on in financial services with financial institutions, with payments. There's new technology coming out every day and new trends happening, new regulations, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So there is never a lack of topics to write about within the financial services space. That said, you're right, though. It's content is king, and a lot of these businesses I work with, particularly at the higher end of the market, whether they're fintechs, whether they're payment processors, whether they're financial institutions themselves, they understand the power of content and the need to keep putting out fresh ideas and fresh content and fresh takes on what's happening in the industry in terms of trends, new technology, you name it, on a regular basis. And to have that regular cadence of content being put out and published through all of your channels regularly. And that goes for, reaching your own existing clients and keeping them informed of what's going on in terms of adding value to those relationships, as well as a way to prospect and reach new potential clients who could potentially use your services. And, I really look at it, when you're talking about content from an educational standpoint, it really is about educating, consumers as well as other businesses in terms of what's happening in the marketplace, and really approaching it from a place of generosity, a place of, sharing your knowledge, sharing what your firm is doing, and sharing your take on the latest news and trends in the industry as a way to help others and kind of raise all the boats in the industry. So yeah, content is super important right now. And it's not only for the largest businesses, it's for everybody, from mom and pop shops to startup businesses, one person entrepreneurial enterprises, all the way up to the largest, publicly traded companies that are out there.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you highlighted. There's two things I want to call out right now, Ted. One is which I love the pushback because you're right. Actually, there are sexy topics that you can find within there. Where my head went was the one financial services long form content that I read every single month is, so I use Stripe across all my businesses. And Stripe actually does a really great job of saying, hey, here's the new things that are popping up. I'm also a tech geek. So like when they loop in technology into the financial services industry, that's stuff that actually intrigues me. And then second, I think it really adds to that is you brought up something that I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs think about with regards to content marketing, which is serving our existing clientele and our existing audience. That in and of itself is a strategy that a lot of people overlook because we're so bogged down with the world of marketing, of lead generation, growing our email list, and all of those that we don't often think about that. Which I think part of me wants to transition a little bit because I'm so intrigued. I know we're going to run out of time today, but this is the one thing that I want to get inside your head for is that client success story angle. Because for all of us in our businesses, if we have clients, hopefully we have success stories. And that in and of itself is content. So I love that you have these two umbrellas that you work under, but really they are related. Talk to us about client success stories because they're not all created equal. They're not just having a one-sentence testimonial. What's your view of a successful client success story strategy?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Brian. And I'm glad you mentioned about the one-line testimonial because that's what a lot of people think of, particularly at smaller businesses, when they think of testimonial or success story, or sharing their clients' thoughts on how they've been able to help them. But for me, that's really just scratching the surface. It's important to have those one-line, one-paragraph testimonials on your website, sharing through your social media. But I also urge your listeners, who may own professional services businesses or small enterprises, to dig a little deeper and to identify some of those clients who they've really been able to help on their own journey and really address those pain points that they may have. And I'll use as an example, so we work with a lot of financial advisors and planners. That's a core market that we serve at Success Story Studio. And these folks, financial advisors, investment advisors, wealth managers have long had a challenging reputation when it comes to, hey, they're just in it for the commission or the fee in terms of managing people's money. But there's been a real about face in that industry in recent years where it's focused more on the planning and helping people with their financial challenges. And it's not just about investing in the stock market. It's about helping them budget for their day-to-day. It's helping them save for their long-term goals. It's about helping put their children through college or save for retirement. And so many of the people that the clients of our clients who we speak to and we help create these case studies or success stories about, it's focused on how do you help that person, that individual, that family, or that couple reach their financial goals. And it comes down to the emotional resonance of that. So phrases like, Joe Smith, our advisor, gave us peace of mind. We can sleep at night. We feel so much more confident in our own financial picture. We've been able to save more for this goal than we ever thought possible. So those are the things that really resonate in a story. And those are the golden nuggets and things that we really try to dig into when we help our clients develop these client success stories.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback on that notion of digging in and going deeper there, because a lot of people might think, well, yeah, obviously having case studies is going to help me from a marketing and a sales perspective. But Ted, I think that the magic behind a good case study is the case study or success story is only ever going to be as good as our ability to find those. If we ask the wrong questions and we're just like, hey, do you like our product or our service? And people are like, yeah, it's, we always get those ambassadorial emails where it says, would you recommend this service to a friend? And I click if it's, for example, I love my business bank is RelayFi. I love RelayFi, and I always say, yeah, I recommend it to others. They have no case study for me, and I don't even know what they would ask me to unlock those beautiful case studies. How do we even start to ask the right questions? Because Ted, I'm going to toot your horn, and beyond just being a good writer, your ability to find the story is what separates your work from others.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that, Brian. And let's take one step back, because it really starts with identifying the right client to highlight. Okay. So first, you need to know who your ideal client is. That person or family, individual, you want to replicate, and you want to multiply them by 10 or 100 times. So once you know who your ideal client is, the type of person you like working with, the person who is most profitable for your business, the person or type of client that doesn't give you a lot of trouble, that's step one. Once you've identified that client, then go through your roster of clients that fit the bill and see those who are your most raging fans, is what we like to call them. Look for those raging fans. So people who maybe have just sent you an email and said, thank you so much for the help, or I love your product and what it's done for me. It's been a life changer. People who have maybe posted reviews online, Google reviews, those type of things. So identify your ideal client, find the people who are really ready to share their story, and then it comes time to actually solicit them and interview them. So once you reach out to them, say, hey, I'd like to, I love what you're saying. We value you as a client. I'd love to share your story with the world so I could get 100 more clients just like you. Once they agree to that, then it's time to ask them the questions. And we usually recommend doing that in an interview type process, whether it's, a Zoom, you could do it over email, but you kind of lose a little bit of the back and forth and ability to dig in more. But the types of questions, Brian, to get to your main point here, the types of questions you ask are really those that dig into the value that you provide, the value that they've gotten out of the relationship, the product, or the service that you provided to them. And that's where I want to talk again about that emotional resonance. It's not always about using the example of the financial advisor. Oh, when I went with Joe Smith, my investment portfolio went up by 40%. First of all, you can't say things like that in a case study because there are regulations preventing it. But also, those aren't the things that matter most to your prospects. What matter most to them is how your client feels about the relationship, the value that they've gotten out of it, from an emotional standpoint. So peace of mind, greater confidence in my financial picture, the ability to achieve my goals. And then, also, they've made me feel great about myself. They always provide excellent service. I could tell they truly value me as a customer or client. So those are those golden nuggets that you really want to try to pull out of the interview, and those make for great quotes within your success story.
Yeah, I love that overview, Ted. I would argue that really the difference between successful businesses and big businesses and us small folks, a lot of solopreneurs, is that we don't have that same social proof, which is a shame because a lot of us are amazing at delivering results for our clients, but not amazing at asking for those success stories. And part of it is, I know, especially in my early 20s when I started my marketing agency, Ted, I had all these results that I could have bragged about and that I wanted to brag about, but I didn't know when to ask my clients. Do I ask them towards the beginning? Do I ask them when our engagement is ending? Do I ask them once we get our first win? I had no idea. What are some of your insights there? Because it is scary for entrepreneurs to go to their clients. We don't normally ask things from them. We normally deliver things to them. How do we navigate that?
Oh, a great question, Brian. And there's no one single answer to that. The best answer is really it depends. And you know your clients best, and you know those relationships best. So, but some things, some tips in that area. So I already mentioned, go back through 6 months of emails. Hopefully, when somebody reaches out to you and says, hey, thank you so much for everything you did for me. You really helped us in this area. We love your service, that type of thing. Hopefully you're saving that in your email inbox somewhere. Go back through about 6 months of those emails and look for those clients who, continuing to get value from the relationship and fit that ideal client profile. Also, as I mentioned, go out there online and look at the Google reviews, look at who's singing your praises on some of those independent platforms. But also you may want to consider, doing some direct reach out, so think about your client roster and people that you've been able to help, people who have really benefited from your product or service. And it's perfectly fine to reach out to them in a spirit of generosity, in a spirit of gratitude. And it could be very simple in an email or the next time you're speaking with them by phone and just saying, listen, I love the fact that you're our client. We value you so greatly. I wish I could replicate you 100 times. Would you be willing to share your story with our potential or prospective clients and tell really the story of how we've been able to help you and the benefits you've received? What's the worst they're going to say? They may say no, or they may say, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not ready to do that right now. And that's okay. That's their right, but it doesn't hurt to ask that question. More often than not, if you have a strong relationship with that person and you know them well, they're going to say yes, and they're going to be very willing to do that for you and with you.
Yeah, obviously you are a master linguist. So that real time, how you just drop those words and that marketing hook on us of making them in the spotlight and saying, I really love working with you. I want to work with 100 more of you. It makes them feel good. It's a really smart approach that doesn't feel like we're asking for something for our own benefit. It really is. You're awesome and we want to shine a spotlight on you. So I love that insight from you, Ted. I want to ask you about the bridge, crossing from content to actual business growth, because it's why so many people hesitate and they're like, well, I've heard content is king, but I don't know how to make it actually help my business grow. Ted, since you are a master of marketing angles and hooks and all of these, I'm curious, are there calls to actions in great content? Does there need to be? Does the content speak for itself? I'm so curious to hear your thoughts on those call to actions and that bridge from content to either leads or clients.
Yeah, Brian, it depends. Again, I'll use the word it depends, but it depends on the type of content. It depends on the purpose of the content. And you need to start with a very strategic approach to your content. Don't just be putting, in other words, if you start a blog, don't just be starting a blog to start a blog. Have a reasoning behind it, have a strategy behind it with, what readers you want to reach and what you want those readers to do in terms of the next step. So, we've all heard about the sales funnel, top of funnel to bottom funnel. So some content is going to reside at the top of the funnel, and that's going to be best utilized for awareness, thought leadership, establishing a platform for your brand in your chosen industry. That type of content doesn't necessarily have to have a direct call to action tied to it. At least not an explicit one, but you do always want to include your contact information, your website. You always want to drive people back to where they could learn more about you and the products and services that you offer. So always have that embedded. As you move further down the funnel, and by the way, case studies or success stories work very well in the mid to lower sections of the sales funnel as a prospect is moving closer to signing on with you for your services or purchasing your products. That's where a case study can help them get across the finish line and become that client with you. But as you move down that funnel with your content, whether it's blogging, whether it's case studies, whether it's your website itself, whether it's podcasting, video content, you name it, that's when you're going to want to have a little bit more of that direct call to action, because people are going to wonder, oh, this is great. I love listening to Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur. What do I do next? How do I learn more about Brian and what he does? That's where you're going to want to have, some lead generation type of assets like, hey, download our free guide. And you're going to want to get these people into your email list or some way where you can continue to nurture them over time. So there's a lot of strategies involved here. That's really just kind of scratching the surface. And Brian, I know you're an expert in this area too, so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I mean, what really stands out to me, Ted, and I want to call it out for listeners, is that you said the word, it's the big word, I think, that goes behind all of today's conversation, is that strategy. We're not talking about creating content for content's sake. We are talking about, even Ted, hearing the way that you think about it and visualize it as part of a bigger funnel is obviously you're not just a copywriter. You're not just someone who's incredible at communications. You are also a brilliant marketer. And I think that's so important because it layers that level of intentionality on all the things that you do. You know where they serve people. You know who they're serving. You have already thought about all of that. You're also, what I'm hearing that I think is so brilliant, Ted, is that when we're talking about client success stories, you're thinking about both sides of the coin. Who is a great indicator of this client success, and then who's going to be receiving it, because I want those two to be somewhat aligned so that people can picture themselves in this story. So I think there's so many brilliant aspects to it. One aspect, I know that I've been more biased as time has gone on about this topic that I want to hear your thoughts on, is video content. I think video is so powerful. Obviously, you and I are recording this on video. 98% of listeners won't be watching us. They'll be listening to us. I think that is also still, though, a very intimate setting for them to hear our voices, our passion for the things we're talking about. What's your take on written content versus video content? I'm especially thinking about some businesses have like the sexiest case study videos where it's so well produced. They've got multiple camera angles, studio lighting. Ted, how can we make sure, whether it's written or video, what's the keys to making it resonate? And is one better than the other?
I think they serve different purposes and they work very well together, depending on what your goals are, who your audience is, what points you're trying to get across, that type of thing. So actually, with a number of my larger corporate clients I work with, very often, I'll be charged with writing a written case study for their client. And at the same time, they're going to have a video crew on site interviewing, their client's team for a video success story. Now, these are much larger enterprise level clients that they're working with. These are financial technology companies that are serving banks and credit unions. So they have the resources to send a team on site and do a really high-end video production. And in those cases, the video asset, which then they may post on their website, they may have, 3-minute snippets that they share, goes very well with a written asset, which may be 4 or 5 pages and could go a little bit more in depth of the value and benefits that they provide that client. So it works very well hand in hand. I think for smaller businesses that may be on a more limited budget, video can be a heavy lift in terms of cost, time, and getting a team together to go on site and do a video session, recording session, that type of thing. You could do it at a lower price point, doing it through Zoom, and I do recommend that. In fact, at Success Story Studio, we do generally recommend interviewing clients via Zoom and capturing that video recording, so then you can convert it into short 30-second clips that could augment the written case study. So I think both have a place. I think video is growing. Obviously, the way we all scroll through our phones 24 hours a day, that is the best way to reach people today. And people are very attracted to video and the visual image. So I think both are important and they serve slightly different purposes and can work very well together.
Yeah, really great insights, Ted. And it fits in with, as I've gotten older, as I've gotten more mature as a person and as an entrepreneur, I've so embraced the power of and thinking. It's not this or that. The two can really work in tandem. And I think for all of us as entrepreneurs, it's important considerations on both fronts that you gave us. And also, I'm going to add in there is that people consume content differently as well. For me personally, I'd rather read something. If you give me a nice looking PDF of a white paper or a case study, I'll probably read that more so than I'll sit down and actually watch a video. I'm not on my phone all that often. And so I love written content. I'll just send it to my Kindle as my personal consumption secret. So I love those insights, Ted. I've got to ask you this because I'm sure that you are starting to think about this, or you probably get questions from family and friends about this. And that is obviously the elephant in the room in 2024, which is AI. So many people think AI is going to be the death of all of these. I personally, the more I interact with you, the more I realize, Ted, you're not going anywhere, because these are insights that AI can't piece together all of these pieces of the puzzle unless a human gave it all those inputs, which at that point, you're doing the work anyway. So AI is not going to replace that. Talk to us about the impact of AI, because there are case studies, I'm sure, of where it can help and aid us in this process. But what's your perspective on how it's going to change things?
Yeah, great question, Brian. AI has definitely been the elephant in the room for the last couple of years now. With the advent of ChatGPT, it's really turned all of our worlds upside down, and it's only going to be more disruptive and life changing for many of us going forward. My take on it, and it is something I try to keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening. I have found in my business, first off, AI can be a very helpful tool. I've used, ChatGPT as an idea generator, as a research tool, as an analysis tool. If you buy the paid plan, it has some pretty powerful analysis software built in for analyzing data, for surveys and things of that nature. So it can do some amazing things. In my industry, as a writer, where I'm seeing people most fearful and where it's being most disruptive is at the lower end of the market. So the so-called content mills. Writers are again paid very little to pump out blogs and other content that is generic, not based on research or proprietary knowledge. A lot of that these days can be replicated by AI. It keeps getting better and better. And if it's not original content, if it's not really presenting a point of view or thought leadership in any way, yeah, I'm afraid a lot of that is gonna go in that direction, and it already has. The top of the market, though, where good writers reside and where smart strategic companies are generating content, I think it's going to be years, decades, maybe never for that to be, fully owned by or replicated by AI. So, in my own business, in my strategy with my two businesses, I've really been looking for where can I double down in those areas? So with case studies, that is original content. My clients have unique relationships with their clients, and every client has a unique story. Everyone is, their own unique butterfly per se. So you cannot replicate that through AI. These are original interviews that be conducted, and every client has something original to say about how that business or that practitioner was able to help them, their family, their business succeed. Another thing that I've been doing in my core business is I've started to focus on original research. So proprietary research, surveys, things that also cannot be replicated through AI, where you go out and you survey an audience and you bring that data back and you analyze that data and you look for those nuggets, those trends, those ideas that maybe have not been presented out in the market yet. And then you package them into a report and content of that type. So, and I urge everyone to do that in their business if they're fearful of it being disrupted by AI and some of these new technologies, is look for ways that you can stand out in the marketplace and that isn't generic and that isn't run of the mill and that AI will not be able to take over.
Yeah, really well said, Ted. It's actually an argument that I found myself formulating in my own head recently, is that concept of, in an AI world, it's actually going to become easier than ever before to stand out, because everyone's blog posts at this point sound the exact same. I see it as a content creator. I also see people pumping out the same types of TikTok videos and Instagram reels and YouTube shorts and podcast episodes, because they're just asking AI, hey, give me 30 ideas for content for this topic. And everyone's got the same stuff. So you're right, hearing those proprietary stories, nobody on planet Earth can replace our client success stories. Will never change. It's impossible to change that because we uniquely serve our clientele. So gosh, I love those insights, Ted. If there's one thing I knew, is there something you want to add to that?
No, not on that topic. Thank you.
All right, cool. Yeah, because if there's one thing I knew today, it's that we would for sure run out of time. And it's such a shame because I don't want to let you go just yet. So I want to squeeze out. I'm going to squeeze in two final questions for you here. One of which is, I just feel like you're uniquely positioned, having been inside the financial services industry for so long, but also because you are a brilliant marketer, because you are a brilliant writer. And on top of that, I'm going to layer on a great storyteller. With those things in mind, I always love stealing ideas from other industries, because if someone is listening and they're a personal trainer, there's something unique about financial services, and you could plug in any industry here that they could learn from. What's something inside the world of financial services that you think, gosh, this is really smart, and most people probably don't realize that this is what powers this industry?
That's interesting. I mean, there's so much that's going on right now. One of the biggest trends that I've been tracking very closely over the last couple of years is buy now, pay later, and I think that is an indicator of kind of a larger trend that's going on within payments and how consumers are utilizing payments, and so the disintermediation of financial institutions, banks, credit unions, credit card issuers, with how, rank and file consumers are now treating their whole buyer's journey and purchasing and using payments. I think it's fascinating to me. And buy now, pay later, if you haven't heard of that, it's sort of like the modern equivalent of installment or layaway plans, where people are able to make purchases on the spot, whether it's online or in store, and without having to pay for that product or service completely at the time of purchase. So there's a lot of good and bad to it. I think it's giving people more purchasing power, especially people who are underbanked or have low or no credit, younger generations, people who may be a little bit less financially secure. It's giving them more purchasing power at the point of sale. At the same time, it could be a detriment to people who are more financially vulnerable in terms of accumulating more debt than they may be able to handle. So it's a very active area right now, and just the evolution of payments. And I guess the lesson for all of us is that you can't be complacent. So if you're a bank or a credit union, you need to find ways to get into that game and be able to serve your members and customers with innovative new products in that way. And I think that goes for all of us, whether you're a fitness gym, you need to find ways to offer people 24/7 access and allow them to pay through an app like my local gym does. If you're an attorney or an accountant, you need to find new ways to reach your clients and offer them, evaluated services in a way that they may be demanding now. So I think it's a lesson to be learned for all of us.
Yeah, really good insights there. I knew you'd have an answer to it. Listeners know that I never prep our guests. There are no pre-planned questions here, but I trusted going there with you. And you're right. Actually, as a consumer, you really touched on a nerve there for me, because I've seen firsthand. So I'm a big fan of buying lifetime software deals. A lot of business softwares that I use in my businesses, I love having those lifetime licenses. They're not always cheap. And so AppSumo, which is my favorite marketplace for lifetime deals, they actually have PayPal credit, 0% interest for 6 months. Buy a lifetime license, pay it off over 6 months, no additional charges there. So that's the one thing that gets me to hit that buy now button. So I love those insights. Ted, my last question of every episode is always the same. It's the one question that listeners know is coming, and that is, what's your takeaway for listeners? We talked about so many valuable things and so much experience and wisdom that you shared with us today. But for listeners, whether they're a entrepreneur or they're an entrepreneur and they're realizing, holy cow, I need to start thinking about content marketing strategies in my business and client success stories, what's your takeaway for them that they can take action on, or a piece of advice that you want to leave them with?
Well, I have so many, Brian, but I want to leave your listeners with one that we just barely touched on this episode, but I think it's really important because it's really the starting place for your content strategy and how you put together your plans to reach out to your marketplace. And that comes down to know your audience. And this is so critically important. If you don't know who you're selling to, if you don't know who you're serving, you're not going to be able to put out good quality content that's going to resonate with them or even reach them. And I'm going to use an example from another part of my life. One of my other passions is music. I'm a bass player. I play in a number of local rock and jazz and blues bands here in the Western New York area. And one thing that fascinates me, I'm not necessarily a front man. I do some backup singing along with playing bass. But one thing that fascinates me is, observing and participating in when we really resonate with a particular audience, what touches them, what gets them going, whether it's a choice of a song, whether it's what we're doing on stage, whether it's our banter back and forth, whether it's how we're moving around on stage, whether it's the sequence of songs that we're playing throughout a set. All those factors come into play. And what you want to do is you want to observe how the audience is reacting to all these different factors and then incorporate that into what you're doing. But that begins with knowing your audience and then constantly observing and resetting and making adjustments as you're going along, fine-tuning that process to make it more compelling and more value added for them. And that comes down to every aspect of marketing, starting with your content. You want to cater your content to what the audience needs and most values. And the only way you're going to know that or do that is by understanding your audience, their pain points, their needs, their challenges, their desires, and their values.
Yes, really powerful advice. And I love that analogy, Ted, because I think it really shows two things about you. One is you have a really intentional approach to all of these things, thinking about all different angles, self-reflecting and asking yourself, what's working from my end and what's resonating with that audience? And two, I just feel like today you've really dispelled through that lens of intention and strategy. You've dispelled so many of the cliches within marketing of, content is king, of know your audience. And you've actually given us tangible examples as to how these things move our businesses forward. So Ted, you've been a wealth of knowledge. I know that listeners are going to be keen to go deeper into your work and your businesses. Drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Excellent. So if you want to reach out to me directly, best place is on my LinkedIn page. That's Ted Goldwyn with a Y. If you want to learn more about Success Story Studio, you can follow us on most of the social media channels. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, and we also have and we have a business page on LinkedIn. And our website is successstorystudio.com.
Listeners, you already know the drill. We are making it as easy as possible for you to find those links wherever it is that you're tuning in. We are dropping all of those links down below. So whatever your go-to platform is, you'll find Ted, you'll find his businesses on LinkedIn, on YouTube, his website, of course, we're linking to down below. So don't be shy in checking out those links. His main business website as well. You can see his name in the title of this episode, Ted Goldwyn. If you just go to tedgoldwyn.com, same spelling, you'll find his communications agency there. Ted, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thank you so much for coming and joining us on the show today.
Brian, thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm honored to be here.